This is the review for the Chapter 8 quiz. You do not have to memorize the formulas for a cylinder, for a cone, or a sphere. These formulas will be given to you. However, you do have to know and memorize that anytime that you're given the diameter, you have to do the diameter divided by 2 to find your radius. Remember that the radius goes halfway across the circle, and the diameter goes all the way across the circle. So anytime that you're given the diameter that goes all the way across a circle, you have to divide it by 2 to get your radius. You also have to know that a hemisphere is half of a sphere. So just take your sphere formula and stick the 1/2 out in front of it. Anytime that you type into the calculator a fraction, you do the top number divided by the bottom number. So for example, 1 divided by 2, or 1 divided by 3, or 4 divided by 3. You want to use the pi button on your calculator. To do an exponent, to do squared, you do the x squared button. To do the cubed for the sphere, you have to use the caret button and then a 3 after it. So the number, caret button, 3. We'll get to square roots and cube roots in a minute. So taking a look at the first one. Remember, for the odd numbers, you want to round your answers to the nearest tenth. So you want to type in everything, including the pi button, into the calculator. For the even numbers, like in number 2, you want to leave your answers in terms of pi. So you type in everything except for the pi symbol, and you type that in at the end. So take a look at question number 1. In question number 1, you are given the radius. All right, the radius goes halfway across the circle. This is 3 1/2 or 3.5. The height of our cylinder is 6. So we want to use the formula for volume of a cylinder, pi r squared h. Pi stays pi, 3.5 squared is your radius, and your height is 6. So multiply all 3 of those things together. You get 230.90706. We want to round to the nearest tenth. The 9 is in the tenths place, so you have to look at the number after it. That is 4 or lower, so that 9 stays the same. Our answer is 230.9. In question number 2, you have a cone. In our cone, the radius goes halfway across the circle. So your radius is 2. Your height goes from the tip of the cone to the center of the circle. We want to use the cone formula. So volume equals 1/3 pi r squared h. We want to leave this one in terms of pi. So you're going to type in everything except for the pi symbol. 1/3 stays 1/3. Pi stays pi. Radius is 2, so times 2 squared times your height of 4. Again, you're typing in everything except for the pi symbol. So you're not going to type in pi because we're leaving it in terms of pi. When you type that in, you get 5.3333 or 5.3 repeating. All that you do is stick that pi symbol at the end. Remember, to type in 1/3, you do 1 divided by 3. In question number 3, this time we're given a cone again. So we want to use the cone formula, 1/3 pi r squared h. But notice in this one, you are given the diameter. The diameter goes all the way across the circle. We never want the diameter. We want the radius. So you have to take this 7, divide it by 2 to find our radius of 3.5 first. So 3.5 is your radius, 4 is your height. So stick those numbers into the formula where they belong. So we have 1/3 times pi times 3.5 squared times 4. Type in everything, including the pi symbol, because we're rounding to the nearest tenth. You get 51.3 and some change. That rounds to 51.3. In question number 4, we're given a cylinder. So we want to use the cylinder formula, volume equals pi r squared h. Notice that this time we're given the diameter again. This 26 goes all the way across the circle. We never want the diameter. We want the radius. So you have to do 26 divided by 2. 26 divided by 2 is 13. 13 is your radius. 8 is your height. So stick those numbers into the formula. So we have pi times 13 squared times 8. Since we're leaving it in terms of pi, we don't type in the pi symbol. It's just 13 squared times 8. You get 1,352. We stick the pi symbol at the end. In question number 5, you're given a sphere. So we want to use the sphere formula, 4/3 pi r cubed. The 48 is the radius. Notice that it goes halfway across the circle. So that's our radius. So we want 4/3 times pi times 48 caret button 3. Remember, to do 4/3, you do 4 divided by 3. We're rounding to the nearest tenth, so we type in everything and get our big, long, ugly decimal. We want to round it to the nearest tenth. The 6 is in the tenths place. We need to look at the number after it. That's 5 or higher. So this rounds up to be a 7. So we get 463,246.7. In question number 6, you're given a sphere again. So we want to use the sphere formula, 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. Notice that you're given the diameter. This goes all the way across the circle. We never want the diameter. We always want the radius. So the very first thing that we have to do is 9 divided by 2, which is 4.5. 4.5 is your radius. So we have 4/3 times pi times 4.5 cubed. We're leaving our answer in terms of pi, so we don't type in the pi symbol. So all that you're typing in is 4 divided by 3 times 4.5 caret button 3. You get 121.5, and then you stick your pi symbol at the end. In question number 6, you're given a hemisphere. So we want to use the hemisphere formula, 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. 3.4 is your radius, so we just want to stick that into the formula. You're rounding to the nearest tenth, so you're going to type in everything, including the pi symbol. So you're going to be typing in 1 divided by 2 times 4 divided by 3 times pi times 3.4 caret button 3. You get a big, long, ugly decimal, and you round it to the nearest tenth, you get 82.3. In question number 8, so it says find the volume of a sphere with a radius of 6. So volume of a sphere, we want to use the sphere formula, 4/3 pi r cubed. It says leave it in terms of pi. So we have 4/3 times pi times 6 cubed. We want to leave it in terms of pi. So we type in everything except for the pi symbol. So you're typing in 4 divided by 3 times 6 caret button 3. You get 288, and we stick the pi symbol at the end. In question number 9, you're finding the volume of a cone. With the cone, notice that it says that it has a diameter of 4.5. We never want the diameter. You always want the radius. So we have to divide that 4.5 by 2 to give us 2.25 for your radius. And then it says that it has a height of 7. So when we stick those numbers into the formula, 1/3 times pi times r squared times h, we have 37 point blah, 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 rounding to the nearest tenth. The 1 is in the tenths place. We want to look at the number after it. That is 4 or lower, so that 1 stays the same. We get 37.1. In question number 10, it says find the volume of a cylinder. So again, we want to use the cylinder formula, pi r squared h. Notice again that it says that it has a diameter of 12. We never want the diameter. We always want the radius. So 12 divided by 2 is 6 for your radius. So we want to plug those numbers in. So we have pi times 6 squared times 2.4. Again, we're leaving it in terms of pi. So you type in everything except for the pi symbol. So 6 squared times 2.4, you get 86.4. And then just stick your pi symbol at the end. So on the front of your quiz, you'll have questions just like that. You'll have 2 cones, 2 cylinders, 2 spheres, 1 hemisphere. Sometimes you'll be given the radius. Sometimes you'll be given the diameter. Just be very, very careful with that. And then you'll have 3 basic word problems, 1 of each shape. Again, be careful whether you're given the radius or given the diameter. I think questions 11, 12, and 13 on your quiz are the hardest for most people. You're being given the volume and you're being given the radius. You need to find the height. So we're working backwards, all right? This comes from section 8-5. So what I would suggest doing is writing down the formula. Cylinder is volume equals pi r squared h. Sub in everything where it needs to go. You're given the volume. So 1005 goes in the volume spot. Pi stays pi. 8 is our radius. So instead of r squared, you have 8 squared. We're looking for the height. Now, when you go to solve for the height, it's just like solving an equation. You want to divide by everything except for the letter that you're solving for. So we want to divide by pi times 8 squared on both sides. That way these pi's cancel out, these 8 squareds cancel out. We're left with just h on the right-hand side. When you divide, you have to make sure that your bottom part is inside parentheses. Otherwise, you'll get the wrong answer. So you have to type this whole thing into the calculator, 1005 point blah, 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 divided by parentheses, which are above the 8 and the 9 on the calculator, pi times 8 squared, close your parentheses. When you do that, you get 4.9 repeating. In question number 12, you have a cone. So the first thing that I would do is write down the cone formula. You're being given the volume, you're being given the height, you need to find the radius. So the next thing that you're going to do is plug in what you know. You know that the volume is 42 and some change. 1/3 stays 1/3, pi stays pi. You're looking for the radius, so that's going to stay r squared. 2.2 is your height. Divide by everything except for the letter that you're solving for. So on both sides, we're going to divide by 1/3 so that these cancel out. We're going to divide by pi, so those cancel out. We're going to divide by 2.2, so those cancel out. So remember that bottom part needs parentheses. You're going to type in everything into the calculator. 42 point blah, 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 divided by parentheses, 1 divided by 3 times pi times 2.2. When you divide, you get 18.49. And now be careful because that equals r squared. Anytime that you have r squared, you need to get rid of that squared. The opposite of squaring a number is to take the square root of a number. The way that you type in the square root on your calculator is by hitting the second button and then your x squared button, which is really your square root symbol, and then the number, and then equals. Now, be careful. If you go to use other calculators, like on your phone or something like that, you might not see a square root button. It might say SQRT. Sometimes you'll have to type in the number first and then the square root button. Other times you'll have to type in the square root button and then the number. Anyway, the square root of 18.49 is 4.3. Again, you only take the square root when it says r squared. In the previous problem, we didn't take the square root because we were just solving for h, not h squared. In question number 13, you have a sphere. So here's the sphere formula, 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. We're being given the volume. We need to find the radius. So stick your volume in the volume spot, 2,482 point blah, blah, blah. 4/3 stays 4/3, pi stays pi. We're looking for the radius, so that stays r cubed. We want to divide by everything except for the letter that we're solving for. So divide by 4/3, divide by pi. That way those cancel out and those cancel out. You want to type in everything into the calculator, including the parentheses in that bottom part. When you do that, you get 592.7 blah, blah, blah. Now that equals r cubed. The opposite of cubing a number is to take the cube root of a number. The way that you do that on your calculator, 3, second button, caret button, which is really this symbol for the cube root, and then your number. So then 592 point blah, 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 blah. So 3, second button, caret button. And when you do your cube root, you get 8.4. You might get 0.0001 on your calculator. That's just 8.4. So you'll have one of each of those shapes on your quiz. The next 3 problems are very, very basic word problems. The first thing that you need to do is identify your shape. Mrs. McCullough purchased spherical balloons. Well, if it says spherical balloons, we're dealing with a sphere. So we want to use the sphere formula. It says that it has a radius of 9. So we want to plug 9 in for the radius. So 4/3 times pi times 9 cubed. We're leaving our answer in terms of pi. So we type in everything except for the pi symbol and you get 972. Just stick that pi symbol at the end. In question number 15, Mrs. McCullough purchased cone-shaped party hats. So we're dealing with a cone. We want to use the cone formula. Now, be careful, trying to trick you here. They give you the diameter, not the radius. Anytime that you're given the diameter, you need to divide by 2 to find your radius. So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5 for your radius. Sub those numbers in where they belong. So 1/3 stays 1/3, pi stays pi. We know the radius, we know the height. Type in everything into the calculator, rounding your answer to the nearest tenth, and you get 102.6. In question number 16, Mrs. McCullough purchased cans of soda for your party. A can is a cylinder, so we want to use the cylinder formula. So volume equals pi r squared h. Be careful, again, trying to trick you. You're being given the diameter. You never want the diameter, you want the radius. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1 for your radius. So be very careful there. Subbing those numbers into the formula, you have pi times 1 squared times the height, which is 5. You're leaving your answer in terms of pi in this one. So you type in everything except for the pi symbol, and you get 5 pi. In questions 17, 18, and 19, you have your combinations of shapes. In this one, we have a cone sitting on top of a cylinder. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and identify my parts and pieces. The height of the cone is 4. The radius of the cone is 3. The height of the cylinder is 12. The radius of the cylinder, either at the top or the bottom, is 3. This 5 is extra information that you don't need. All right, it's there to confuse you. So you have a cone plus you have a cylinder. The first thing that I would do is write down the formulas. 1/3 times pi times the radius squared times the height plus pi r squared h. You have to sub in all 7 of those things. All right, so 1/3 stays 1/3, pi stays pi, 3 is your radius, 4 is your height. Pi stays pi, don't forget your plus sign. Pi stays pi, 3 is your radius, 12 is your height. You need to type in all 7 of those things into the calculator all at once. When you do that, you should get 376.99, blah, blah, blah. That would round up to be 377. In question number 18, you have a cone sitting on top of a hemisphere. The height of the cone is 10. The radius of both the cone and the hemisphere is 4. First thing that I would do is write down, you have a cone plus a hemisphere. So the cone formula is 1/3 pi r squared h, plus you have the hemisphere, which is 1/2 times 4/3 times pi r cubed. Now be careful, you're leaving this one in terms of pi. So when you go to type it into the calculator, you're going to type in everything except for the pi symbols. So sub in what you know. 1/3 stays 1/3, pi stays pi, 4 is your radius, 10 is your height, plus 1/2 stays 1/2, 4/3 stays 4/3, pi stays pi, 4 is your radius. Type in all 6 of those things, you get 96, and then stick your pi symbol at the end. In question number 19, in this one, it says, find the volume of the remaining figure after the figure inside of the other one is removed. Well, this cone is inside of the cylinder. So we're taking the cone and taking it out of the cylinder. You always want to do the bigger shape minus the smaller shape. So what we're really doing here is the cone is inside of the cylinder. So we want to subtract the cone from the cylinder. So the cylinder minus the cone. Cylinder formula is pi r squared h. Your cone formula is 1/3 pi r squared h. So we need to sub in the numbers where they belong. Pi stays pi, 6 is your radius, 8 is your height, minus this time because we're taking it out. 1/3 stays 1/3, pi stays pi, 6 is your radius, 8 is your height. Type that right into the calculator, all 7 of those things. Make sure that you remember to type in the minus sign, you get 603.2. So you'll have 3 of those questions. Again, these are the formulas that you need. You'll be given the first 3. You won't be given the diameter. Anytime you're given the diameter, you want to divide it by 2. And then remember that hemisphere has the 1/2 out in front of it.